Like a lot of you guys, I love DC. I grew up a big DC fan. Justice League Unlimited, Batman the Animated Series, Superman the Animated Series. And ever since my youth, I wanted films that would represent these characters in the ways that they deserve to be recognized. Now, to be fair, we've had those films before I was born and even after. So I guess what I should actually be saying is that I always wanted a universe, a cinematic universe, if you will, that would build these characters up with the esteem that we as fans know they deserve. Marvel finally got their act together in 2008 when they started with Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk. In 2012, they made it to the finish line with the Avengers. And then in the following years, they kept going around the track. But where was DC? DC's biggest franchise at that point was the Dark Knight trilogy, which I love, but Christian Bale was never gonna meet a Superman. He was never gonna meet Brandon Routh as we all hoped he would. So the idea of a Justice League film was as fantastical as the Justice League itself at this point. And sure, we were close with films like Justice League Mortal and a Batman vs Superman movie in the early 2000s, and this joke from I Am Legend, but that wasn't reality. And then finally in 2013, we got Man of Steel, the birth of the DCEU. And although in hindsight I can appreciate the approach to Superman within that film, it wasn't ideal. Superman is a character that we aspire to be, a character that takes hope and embodies it. He is the persona of belief. And in that film, in that universe, their depiction of hope is kind of dreary. So as the films went on and the universe started to crumble, it was announced that James Gunn would be heading DC Studios and starting from scratch. And it's going pretty strong, all things considered. Creature Commandos is still going on and it's going pretty strong. It kicks ass. And recently, with the first look of Superman starring David Corenswet, I am extremely excited for where this DCU is headed. But one of the biggest questions that everybody has is, what is the depiction of Batman going to be in the DCU? Now, years ago when James Gunn was announced as the head of the DCU, he talked about his Batman film set within that continuity, calling it The Brave and the Bold. And it would be about Batman and Robin, specifically Damian Wayne. And we didn't get too much regarding the story, aside from it being inspired by Grant Morrison's run on Batman and Robin, and rumors and then reports that Indy Muschietti, director of The Flash, would be directing it. We really didn't know what the movie was about. I still kind of don't know what it's about. There are all sorts of rumors, but rumors are like sand. They're coarse, rough, and get all over the... I don't know where I was going with that. The implication of this film, of this Batman, is that he's an established Batman. A Batman who has members of the Bat family surrounding him. And that the take on the character is much more fantastical than what we've gotten in films previous. And that's all cool and good and everything. But with such little information about this Batman being released to the fans or acknowledged by James Gunn, and especially with the news that the Batman 2 and The Brave and the Bold have both been put on hold, I'm skeptical about the DCU's version of the Batman. I've been kind of skeptical about the DCU in general, which is weird because I'm really excited to see what's next. Superman looks great. Creature Commandos has been awesome so far. I'm really excited for Supergirl and Lanterns. They just announced that Jason Momoa is finally playing Lobo. They're on course for the right direction. But there's still something inside that is making me very apprehensive with my excitement. And I think it's all due to the idea of there being two cinematic Batmen. Back when Justice League Mortal was in pre-production, the idea of the film was that we would have a new Batman played by Armie Hammer. It wouldn't be Christian Bale, but the films would come out at around the same time. We'd have the Dark Knight trilogy and Justice League Mortal, which is starting a new DC franchise. That's weird. And it's just as weird now that we would have the Batman with Robert Pattinson and a new Batman in The Brave and the Bold. I'm a comic book fan, and that still kind of confuses me, especially with a lot of the reports that are coming out regarding Batman. So, like a lot of fans, I really just want them to merge the Batman reality into the DCU. I think it makes sense. Looking at photos of Pattinson's Batman next to Corenswet's Superman, they complement each other so well. Why wouldn't you pair them up? Especially if the reports are to believe that Pattinson and Gunn want this to happen. There have been all sorts of weird things going on with the Batman Part 2. We don't know if the script is done. Matt Reeves has said that it is. James Gunn is saying that it isn't. The movie's now delayed to 2027. I've talked to some friends about why this is, and some think that it's because they want to see how well Superman does. But honestly, I think it's because they're starting to realize the confusion that people are feeling, that we're going to have a new Batman played by a different actor in an established reality that isn't Pattinson. And though there have been great fan casts online, the most popular I think is Jensen Ackles as Batman for the DCU, which I would be really down to see. I still think it's weird that we're gonna get 2 live-action Batman in theaters, but they're not, but they're it's just, I just find it unnecessary. Now, I understand the trepidation from Matt Reeves. Matt Reeves was announced back, I think in 2017, to direct the Batman, back when Affleck was still playing the role. And due to studio politics, scripts not being ready, Affleck's personal troubles, we didn't get the film that Reeves was initially brought on to make. But he got to make the movie he always wanted to make. So I understand his trepidation in bringing his version of the character into a larger world. But I always looked at the potential for the Batman in the same way as the first Iron Man film in regards to the MCU. Iron Man 1 is a very grounded film. It opens up in Afghanistan. And back in 2008 when they started that universe, who could have pictured that we would have gotten to Endgame with the character? Robert Downey Jr.'s performance took that universe to a whole other level. That character is an icon, and I always believed that the Batman could be that for the DC universe. A very grounded story to help us feel the universe of Gotham, to get a sense of this Batman, and then things could start to spread out. I know that a lot of people consider the Batman to be a very realistic take on the character, which it is in some regards, but there are still fantastical elements in the film. And I'm one of the guys who, when I heard Batman's last monologue in that film, talking about how he had to become Hope, the first thing I thought of was Superman. And I really wanted, from that point, to see Pattinson's version become the Batman character that we all know from comic books, from animated shows, from video games. And I still think there's that potential for the character. Now, this video isn't about whether or not they should do it. Well, I guess it is. Whether you agree or don't agree with this pitch, I'm really curious to hear what you guys think about what I'm about to say. Because when it comes to this subject, there are 2 schools of thought. He should be, and he shouldn't be. These are just my ideas, so let me know what you guys think. The Batman crime saga is something that is obviously developing within Matt Reeves' story. We've seen that with the Batman, and we've seen that with the Penguin. And Batman in this context is really the only guy who can make an effective change. I don't want to take away the dark reality from this saga. I don't want to see the Batman Part 2 lean into jokes that fit within James Gunn's style. And I don't think James Gunn would even want that to happen. This movie and the show work because of Matt Reeves' vision. And thankfully, James Gunn has stated that the visions of directors has to be maintained for this universe to feel unique. So, keep the dark realism, have Batman set in Gotham by himself, let Matt Reeves do exactly what he planned to do. The way to tie it in is to make the Batman crime saga set before the first appearance of Superman in Metropolis. So the crime saga would technically be a pseudo prequel to the DCU. That way, Matt Reeves' story is not disregarded or tarnished. His interpretations of the characters remain the same. And then later on, when we see Pattinson's Batman interact with characters like Superman, it is set after the crime saga, after his youth period. In the first film, it's only been 2 years of him doing his thing. So in the next films and shows that Batman's story continues, those can be the following years. We can see a Robin appear, different villains. We're gonna get a Clayface film. You can sow the seeds in that. And in my opinion, the Batman world needs to become more fantastical so that we can see characters that we haven't seen before. Characters that we want to see. The #1 villain people want to see in the second Batman film with Robert Pattinson is Mr. Freeze. I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to see a hyper-realistic version of that character. I always said that if we were going to get 2 Batmans in 2 different universes, save the fantastical villains for the DCU, because I don't want to see the Nolan treatment for characters that don't need it. So if we're looking at the way this is set up, the Reeves-verse is just set before Superman. A couple years, 5 maybe, 7, you can get a lot of good storytelling within that. And then Superman happens. And then when we see Pattinson's version of the character, he can be the Batman that James Gunn originally pitched. Pattinson at that point will be old enough to play the Batman that he pitched. And realistically, he could have a Damian Wayne at that point. I think this is the best option because it maintains Matt Reeves' creative vision, and it also gives the fans what they want. Now, not all the fans want to see Matt Reeves' version of Batman inducted in the DCU, and I understand that. But just think about if this happened. If this were the case, let's look right now. If the Batman became canon into the DCU, look at the bangers there already are in the DCU. The Batman, the Penguin, Creature Commandos, Superman looks great. I think this would be the best option. And especially after hearing that Pattinson wants this to happen. Like, there's no reason for it not to. Now, for those diehard Batman fans that want the movie to be set in its own reality, I hear you. Part of me has trouble seeing Matt Reeves' version of the character fitting in to James Gunn's world. And there are some canon issues. The DCU is a world that is set up to have had superheroes for decades, since at least World War II. People would ask, why haven't any of those superheroes been mentioned in the Batman or the Penguin or anything? Well, personally, I think Gotham is already a bit of a hellhole enough to where Batman isn't focused on where Superman or Guy Gardner or Hawkgirl or whoever are. He's trying to solve cases at this point. He's not thinking about the Metal Men. He's thinking about taking down the Riddler. And also, that's a question that's kind of the equivalent of where was Batman during the Penguin? Well, he was dealing with other stuff. I understand that this is going to be a hot take for some people, but I love the Batman. I love that film. I've grown to really appreciate it over the years. I'm wearing the outfit that I wore to see the film back in 2022. And again, I get that Matt Reeves is resistant to the idea, but I don't think he's closed off from the idea.
Could a Superman exist in this Batman world, or is it sort of, these are separate things?
If suddenly in the Batman world, you discovered that there was an alien that was Superman, there'd be a lot of shock. I mean, people would have to say like, oh my God, and maybe that would be the one fantastical element. But to be honest with you, that is not the intention at this point, to figure out how to make that come. If, look, we should be so lucky that this is a world that people embrace and that they say like, oh my God, we want to see what would happen when those things collide. I think if that challenge ever presents itself, it would be an exciting one to explore, but I'd have to try and do it through this lens.
I know that James Gunn is not closed off to the idea.
Have you contemplated, have you had the conversation, have you reconsidered integrating Pattinson's Batman into your DCU?
I've contemplated it. Yeah, I've contemplated it. Gotta contemplate everything, John.
Robert Pattinson's Batman has the potential to achieve the echelon of Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man and surpass it. The connection that audiences felt with Iron Man throughout the whole Infinity Saga, imagine that times 10. This is Batman we're talking about. One of the biggest, if not the biggest superhero in the world. You want to see a Justice League film starring David Cornsweet and Robert Pattinson's Batman. I want to see that. So guys, what do you think about this idea? Are you opposed? Are you for? By the way, please check out our Kickstarter for our short film, Poncho, a superhero who can take on Batman. If Pattinson's not available, we'll put Daniel in Justice League. Have a good one, stay safe, and goodbye.